Is success about what we accomplish or how we accomplish? Let's explore. In 1884, there was this Austrian lawyer. He had come down to London and he purchased a yacht. Now, the challenge was he had to take the yacht back to Sydney. And this was 1884. There were no cargo planes that you split the yacht and just package it, put it in the cargo plane, it'll fly you to Sydney. No, it's not going to happen that way. And so he had to sail it. He had to sail the yacht from London to Sydney. He was looking around for experienced sailors, and he finally found Tom Dudley, an experienced sailor. And Dudley was known for his long sailing trips. Dudley took up the offer, and he put in a crew together, and he called some of his old friends. He called on Edward Stephens and Brooks, and he needed somebody. Now, Stephens and Brooks were senior sailors. So Dudley, Stephen, and Brooks, the three senior sailors, they'll be busy sailing the yacht. So they needed somebody to do the basic work, like cleaning and cooking and basic work. So they picked on this young boy called Richard Parker, a 70-year-old kid. He was hired. And they all set sail from Hampton, and they were all well rationed and well stocked with food, water, everything. And they started the journey. Journey was beautiful till they reached Cape of Good Hope. And once they reached Cape of Good Hope, they ran into severe stormy weather. And one evening, the storm was so massive that they got into trouble. And they just ditched the yacht and they got into a dinghy, a lifeboat. And imagine the scene. It's all storm. They're in the lifeboat, all four of them, just adrift. There's no food, there's no water. They stay adrift for 24 days. Hungry, thirsty. They were absolutely short of water. They couldn't drink the sea water. There came a time when they were actually drinking the urine to survive. It was seriously pathetic. In those 24 days, somehow Dudley was able to capture and kill a tortoise. So they survived on tortoise blood and meat for some days. But it was miserable. There was no sign of any ship. There was no sign of any help. They were just drifting, thirsty, hungry, absolutely parched with thirst, absolutely dry, absolutely horrible. And that was a time, out of sheer desperation, Richard Parker, the young kid, 17-year-old kid, out of sheer desperation, he drank the seawater because he had to quench his thirst. And resulting which, Parker fell sick. He was seriously sick. Now, when Parker fell seriously sick, all the three of them, the senior ones, the Dudley, Stephens, and Brooks, all the three of them looked at Parker and they realized that if they can sacrifice Parker, they can survive this journey. And that's what they did. One fine morning, Dudley pulled out his penknife. Brooks held Parker's feet. Stephens held Parker's hands. And they just killed Parker. After killing Parker, they just consumed him. Can you imagine? You consume a young boy, and they just consumed him. And they survived on Parker's blood and Parker's flesh till the time they were rescued. Now, the larger question was, what they did, was it right or wrong? If you look at the means they used to survive is absolutely unethical. But if you look at the end, some of them will justify that fine. I mean, it was okay to sacrifice one because they survived the end. And this is one of the biggest questions in ethics, means and ends. In today's session, that's what we'll discuss. We'll discuss the meaning of end and means. We'll discuss what are the difference between these two. We'll explore the relationship between ends and means. And lastly, their relevance to ethics. Let me begin by explaining the meaning of the word end and means. Now, when I say end, it refers to outcomes or goals an individual or a society or a group would like to achieve. The word is achieve, the goal, the end. Now, the goals can be anything. It can be individual, it can be social, it can be political, or it can be economic also. So it's all about the goal, it's all about the outcome, it's all about the results, it's all about the consequences, it's all about the benefits. While means, on the other hand, refers to actions, processes, methods used to achieve that end. So it refers to all those actions and processes that actually play an instrumental role in achieving that end. Both the terms ends and means are very critical in ethics. Why? Because they both deal with morality of an action and legitimacy of outcomes. So that is why we need to understand both the terms. These are very basic terms in ethics. If you ask me, there are four basic terms in ethics. One is right, one is good, one is means, and one is end. If you can get these four words right, you get the crux of ethics. While both ends and means are very critical component of ethical decision making, because whenever we make decisions, either they are means focused or either they are end focused. Now, what is important here is we need to understand the differences between these two as well. Why? Because understanding the difference will make you understand or give you clarity in terms of ethical theories. The key difference between ends and means is how they justify morality of an action. Let's take consequentialism. Now, consequentialists justify morality of an action based on ends. Now, what they believe is if the outcome is good, it's the outcome that justifies the means. So it's a very end focused approach. Let's take J.S. Mill. Mill argues actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. On the other side, what we have is deontologists who strongly believe not in ends, who strongly believe in right means. What they believed is an action's morality is determined by the means used. They strongly believe that every single action should be aligned to principles. Every single action should be aligned to moral duties. So they have this strong belief that action is morally right as long as it fulfills obligations, as long as it aligns with moral principles, irrespective of consequences. So that's why deontologists are more means focused, whereas the consequences are more end focused. Let's take Kant for an example. Act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. The second big difference between ends and means is one focus on the outcome, the other focus on the action. If you look at consequentialists, they are focused on the outcome, they are focused on the goals, they are focused on the ends. Whereas on the other side, what we have is they focus on the action, the principle behind the action, the intention behind the action. For example, in politics, the difference between ends and means is very clear. For example, a government may curtail civil liberties in the name of national security. So, some people may question this. The government is violating means to achieve a greater end. But on the other side, the consequentialists will justify this by saying that there's nothing wrong in compromising with the means in the name of greater good. Ends and means always had a complex relationship. In fact, philosophers and ethicists have been debating among ends and means for a very long time. One school of thought says ends justify means. On the other school that believes means matter more than the ends. In fact, a morality of an action should be judged on the basis of means independent of outcomes. So there's been a big debate. But as we explore the relationship between means and ends, it completely depends on the ethical framework one believes in. For example, if you're a consequentialist, the relationship between ends and means is absolutely straightforward. Yes, absolutely straightforward. If the ends are desirable, means become immaterial. On the other side, we have the deontologists, where the relationship between ends and means are very rigid. In fact, for a deontologist, means are non-negotiable. You cannot compromise with the means. You cannot compromise with principles. Now, when it comes to ends and means, everybody talks about deontology and consequentialism, but I have a surprise for you. Virtues. Aristotle had a very interesting perspective. Aristotle believed in moral excellence, that is, virtues. Now, what Aristotle believed is a human being or an individual who cultivates virtues like honesty or prudence or courage or truthfulness. Now, that person will try to lead a virtuous life. And for a virtuous human being or for a virtuous individual, it's not about means or ends. For them, it's all about living a virtuous life. And living a virtuous life means using the right means, having right ends in mind. Every moral choice we make or every moral decision that we make revolves around these two words, ends and means. And the interplay between these two leads to all the big dilemmas in the world. That's why you have to understand the relevance of the word ends and means. That's why you need to understand the relationship between ends and means. Let me give you some real life examples just to elaborate my point of view. We need to understand ends and means because if we understand that, we'll understand our dilemmas. If you look at our lives are full of dilemmas, and almost all these dilemmas revolve around ends and means. If I'm a businessman, my end is to make profit. So my biggest dilemma is should I cut corners here and there just to improve my or increase my profit? So big dilemmas. So you need to understand ends and means. It's the same with case studies. If you really want to do your case studies well, and remember, all the case studies are real life dilemmas. If you really want to do your case studies very well, you need to understand the end and the means dilemma. Leave aside personal life, or leave aside corporates, or leave aside business. Politics is also dominated by ends and means dilemma. For example, imagine you're a counter-terrorism expert. You catch hold of a terrorist and you get the information that the terrorist organization has hidden some bombs in the city. Will you torture him to get the information? Yes or no? If you're a deontologist, if you believe in means, you'll never think in terms of torturing him because you're violating a big moral principle of not to cause harm. If your ends focused, you don't mind. I repeat, if your ends focused, you don't mind torturing him because your end justifies the means. Now, a surprise for all of you. Ends and means in the context of governance. Ends and means in the context of public service. I'm sure this is what you guys have been waiting for. Ends and means in the context of public administration. Now just imagine you're a civil servant. Will you be end focused or will you be means focused? Interesting, right? If anybody wants to be ethical civil servant, he has to learn to balance, or he or she has to learn to balance both. You need to get your means also right. You need to focus on good outcomes also. Understanding of ends and means are very critical to understanding ethical decision making. Now, from exam perspective, please remember ends and means, understanding these two terms are very important, not only to understand determinants of ethics in human action, it's also critical for understanding case studies. Because most of the case studies focus around ends and means dilemmas only. And forget all that. Even in your real life, you have to get your ethical decision right, means you need to understand the connection between ends and means. Before I close, I leave you with Mahatma Gandhi's quote, "The means are ends in making." Think about it. So long for today. Happy learning. See you all soon.